Hi guys, thanks for joining me today, spending some time with me today. I appreciate hanging out with you and talking about some awesome art stuff. Today I want to talk about understanding appeal, aka designing chef's kiss, delicious imagery, to me, this is really interesting stuff. I put together this presentation 4 years ago, actually, and now I'm sharing it with you guys at Lightbox. So thank you so much. I love Lightbox, and I was there in person for the first one, and it was the probably the best art event ever. It had the best vibes, and you felt like just good, just good. How it should be kind of art event. It was great. So thank you guys all for contributing to Lightbox, and let's keep this dream alive. We're gonna all see each other soon. The world is gonna be, safe enough for us to meet again and have fun and be in the same room and laugh and learn and all the good stuff. All right, so I wanted to say that I actually put this together 4 years ago for industry workshops, another art event that was really great. Um, as you can see, hopefully tell in my voice, I love art events, so I encourage you to always go out to them, when it's safe to do it, and meet friends, make new friends, make connections, learn all this. It's just art events to me are like just such a joyful, wholesome bonding activity and like learning activity, and just it's just like so many good things all rolled into one, right? So I just wanted to say also, so thanks to Lightbox for helping me present this to you guys today, share this information with you guys today, and as well thank you to Industry Workshops people for what, because the opportunity they gave me to put this presentation together in inviting me to be there and speak was one of the first times where I actually had to look at, okay, what would I actually present to people and say? Because if I really wanted to make good use of the opportunity to speak to people and provide them something of value, because I just would have felt wrong if what got on a stage to speak about didn't feel like it benefited at least everybody in a small way, who would sit down to share some time with me and listen to me. So I hope that this presentation gives you at least a hint of something. It's kind of a very general presentation. It's not going to be like a grueling thing to listen to, and like you're not going to have to like think of very very specific difficult information. It's kind of a collection of ideas that I like to um, notice their impact overall on image making, and I put it together in such a way that it's going to take a little while to talk about, and no specific topic is going to be like really hunkered down on and discussed in detail, but it's going to give a really good overview and kind of a list of things that are important to keep in mind while you're making your images, while you're sketching, while you're outside, just thinking about things, like learning to see, learning to draw, learning to think, about visual imagery and image making and all these kind of stages of your artistic journey. So let's get into it, and thanks for sharing some time with me today. All right. So the first thing I wanted to do was that, well, usually this presentation is like in real life, right? Like on a stage. So I want to break the ice a little bit because, I mean, I'm not that nervous, like I'm not that shy, but it's always a little nerve-wracking to be put on a stage where you have to talk to people, and they might not know you and that kind of thing. So you want to break the ice a little bit. So this is how I broke the ice for my presentation, was I put a little dad joke in there. I like dad jokes. I'm kind of silly, So this is one of my favorite dad jokes, and the dad says, "There's going to be thousands of people in Bristol tonight," and the son says, "Why?" And he says, "Because they live there." And yeah, I don't know if you don't get it, that's fine, but I love this joke. So that's a little bit of me. Okay, so this is me, just as a super quick intro to what I'm gonna say. If you don't know about who I am, that's totally fine. You don't need to at all. I'm just another artist, but I like me, so I hope you like me and we can be friends and such. I'm usually out, and here's like these kind of hieroglyphics of me. I'm out in the sun taking a walk, usually in nature, taking photos. Not so much nowadays. Now I use my eyes more, take like memory photos, or I'm drawing or something like that. And I like frogs. Another thing is that, I guess in art terms, this is a kind of a little stat list I made of myself, where I kind of determine like either what I'm focusing on in artwork or what my artwork is about, or the kind of things you can see in it. So I see myself as having skills in these areas in this kind of amount. It's just a vague, kind of fun little thing. But if you want to do this for yourself, I would encourage you to, because I feel like it's a fun way to do a little kind of like an assessment of yourself and see what you care about, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are. So for me, I really think a lot about shape, color, and light. Mostly, form and perspective come secondary and tertiary. So I'm not very well versed. I kind of have more of like a uh, mental grasp on perspective, but I'm not an expert. And fun is something I really try to think about. I find that I'm thinking about it. My artwork isn't the most fun it could ever be. I think that it could stand to gain more fun, but I try to keep a good amount of fun in there. And it's always been something that, as soon as I started to react to the idea that I liked seeing fun in other people's artwork, so why not have my own fun too, and I enjoy artwork where you see the artist is having fun. So anyways, these are my kind of attributes, I guess, and that's just so you get to know a little bit more about me. Right before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to show my website a little bit, like just a quick scroll. So this is kind of what I do. We can read my bio real quick. The reason I'm doing this is because I usually don't talk about me at all, and I'm just like, okay, let's get to the information really quick. But since Lightbox is really big and has a lot of people, maybe people like don't know who I am at all. So you might want to know that I kind of know what I'm talking about a little bit before before you invest like an hour into listening to me, right? So this is the stuff I do, and this is my bio. But again, it's not really serious because I'm more just like a carefree kind of person. But anyway, so let's just have a read here. Hi, I'm a forest pond creature and freelance visual development, concept color key artist living in Spain, particularly interested in appreciating life, adventure, nature, and visual storytelling. Currently enjoying designing simple and appealing shapes, color, and light to express those interests with a whimsical, playful flavor. Curious to eventually try art directing or something else. Here's hoping you're having a great day. Feel free to contact me at. All right, so that's me. Next. Okay, so what I want to stress right before we get into the juice, the sauce, is that ultimately I believe in personal judgment as like really our strongest skill. And all these ideas that I'm going to present to you are just my opinions, so use these ideas and your opinion on them, like how you react to what I'm going to be saying, as a compass. Don't think that anything I'm saying, I'm telling you like you have to think about it in this way. I'm not really about that. So I'm just like suggesting, and then whatever it means to you, whatever happens in your brain, as a reaction to what I'm saying, that's the interesting part. So just think about that. So yeah, your personal voice comes into play, and that's who you are. So the information I'm going to present in this conversation is just going to kind of, I'm trying to like feed your personal voice so that you can express it even louder, even clearer. Okay. Um, I'm saying a lot, aren't I? All right. So something I want to talk about is that there's a misconception, in my opinion, my humble opinion, that pervades the minds of many a young artist. And it used to kind of piss me off a lot. Now I'm more at peace, like it's everybody has like several parts of the journey, and we're all, all at a different part in our path and whatever. And we kind of need all of it, I feel like, So maybe there's no misconception. Maybe it is how it has to be. But that's really too metaphysical for the moment. Let's just talk about what's on this specific slide right now, right? Okay, so the point is that I believe that the misconception is this thought: when I know how to paint everything right, I will be good and make good art. And the reason I think that's wrong is that I've just seen so many discussions online and in calls and in posts on forums and on Facebook and on Instagram and whatever, or like in Facebook groups where people are asking questions, or giving crit, whatever, where people are like asking for help. And then the critique is like something very like minute and detailed, and it's like you didn't paint the wood correctly on that chair, or like you don't know exactly how the light works, or I don't know, something that to me felt like kind of pedantic and like unnecessarily knowledge based and like too exact to even be like the true core problem of that someone could solve. Um, sometimes those things are important, like the way you treat details or the way you treat like the specific nature of what you're painting. But a lot of times, I really do think that it's more about how things are um, put together, and how the overall presentation of the idea comes across. Like a lot of times, it's not at all about exactly how you painted something or the little mistakes you made in the details or in the material or something like that of your painting. It's more like an overarching problem, like the composition is not appealing, or there's no depth, or um, different kind of ideas like that we're going to talk about, that to me feel like they're even more important. And then you can do all those little like more perfectionist things you want to do, but it's kind of like that idea about polishing a turd. It's like not really worth it. Anyway, so I think it's more time effective to, with what I know right now, I can make good art. To think of it that way. And I want to give you guys tools to take what you know right now and kind of like reframe it, and hopefully come out making better artwork. Like next time you sit down to make a piece, or you're ideating, or you're like iterating on something you have an idea about, hopefully you can think like, what are a few things um, that I can like approach this with a little better than last time, and then a little better each time. Yeah. So this is an important juxtaposition, I guess, to me: truth and appeal. And I think that as artists, it's up to us to arrange and interpret information. That's essentially what we're doing whenever we make an image. And even in realistic work, photography, sculpts, whatever it is, etc., you're just arranging and interpreting information of the world, and of the imaginations and such. And truth and appeal come into play in this way. To me, this is one way to talk about it. Um, by the way, throughout this presentation, I'm going to be mostly using other people's artwork. This is what the first case you'll see. Uh, Throughout the presentation, like I said, it's almost all other people's artwork. At the end, I'll talk a little bit about my own. But the reason I'm doing a lot of other people's artwork and observation and pointing things out about it is that that's how I learned for myself. I learned through kind of reacting to what I saw in other people's imagery or out in the real world, what appeals to me. And I find that if I had only learned through my own work, um, I don't really know if that can happen as a human being. You know what I mean? Where like you're not good enough to, if you only look at your own stuff in a vacuum and you only consider the flaws, like there's so many, and you don't even have a direction of where you might want to go, or someone whose artwork feels like where you might want to go. Anyway, so all that to say that we're going to be looking at other people's artwork and seeing like what makes it work, and how come it looks so good and appealing and delicious, and like what we can gather from that for our own purposes. Anyways, so on truth versus appeal, back to the point. So the first image, basically all three of these images are true, right? Like they're true, they exist, they're on this slide. We can look at them, they're in this world with us. Okay, so there's sheep in the first image, and there's sheep in the second, and there's sheep in the third. It's all like a flock of sheep. But the first image is the most, I would say, like purist, I guess. It's the most 100% truth based. Like if you saw truth and appeal on like a spectrum, let's say. And you can replace appeal with whatever you want, like stylization or um, I don't know, whatever, if you like another word better. But I like appeal because it covers a lot of bases, or like well designed, whatever. So the first image, wow, I'm like, I need to get to the point faster, sorry. So the first image is the most close to truth on the spectrum, right? The second one, with the photograph there on the bottom left, is a little closer to appeal. And the third image is the furthest towards appeal. And the reason I think this is that the first one is simply a representation. It's kind of like there are sheep in this field, but nothing in particular is the focal point. There's no particular message being sent or storytelling. Maybe there is a little bit of storytelling if we really look for it, like there is a group of sheep in that first image, and the rest are a little more scattered. Makes you think maybe like there's a nice little friend group here among these sheep. Who knows? Something like that. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that in the second and third images, even though they are a photograph and a painting, they both imply more storytelling and appeal, and they bring the viewer in more so than the first image. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with like, uh, when I know how to make good art, or when I know everything, I'll be able to make good art. Like the first image has correctly depicted sheep, right? Like they look real. Their wool is very detailed and accurately represented because it's a photo. But it's not, to me at least, that's the worst of the images in terms of appeal. So what I mean by this whole presentation, basically the message is that like, um, even if something is painted really well or really detailed or really accurately, doesn't make it good. Like there's other things that make it really good. So I hope that you can see that like, even the fact that the second image is a photograph, it's still more appealing than the first image because it uses framing and like a subjective arrangement of the information by the artist to frame the information in a more appealing way. So yeah, just think about like the spectrum of truth versus appeal, and how different decisions and ideas can like categorize your image differently along that spectrum, I suppose. Now, what is an appealing image? To me, at least, it's an image that draws you in, is interesting, and keeps you kind of like thinking it's appealing. So some possible strengths of an appealing image are that it's dynamic, designed, it might have good brushwork, it's well balanced, could be evocative of certain emotions, it's effective, it's readable, has a good focal point. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm covering that a little bit, so I'll just make myself disappear for a moment. So there you go. It has a focal point, etc. Let's go back. Next. What is an unappealing image? Usually, unappealing makes us think it's, to be honest, to me, it feels like something not really worth looking at. Uh, it's harsh to say, but like that's kind of the feeling that when I get, the feeling I get when we're looking at an unappealing image is kind of like, like next. You don't really want to stick around and look at it. Whereas an appealing image, you would want to stick around and look at it. So, possible weaknesses of an unappealing image. It might be confusing, could be static, could be boring, uninteresting, muddy, muddy colors, values, something clashes, it looks too flat, something's wrong, it just feels wrong or it looks wrong, could be too noisy, too much going on, and etc. I'll just disappear for a second again. So as you can see, noisy, etc. All right, next point. Okay, so why should we understand appeal? I'm looking at the little emoji, and that's actually a good point, because I think that the reason we should understand appeal is that as artists, I feel like we should be like detectives, thinking like, what makes imagery work? What makes it not work? How can I gather more insight about this, So I think that if we're aware of it and grasp how it works, we're more likely to make successful images. And I think we all want to be making successful images, right? We want to draw the viewer in, but not only that. I mean, in the first place, you want to draw yourself in. You want to be interested in your own image making. If you were not interested in the things you were making, and if you didn't find that you had the capability to make something appealing to yourself, then I doubt that you would pursue it further for much longer, So I think you're more likely to make successful images. That works for other people enjoying what you make, but first and foremost, for you to enjoy the making of the things you make, right? So, and I also think very importantly that it's not just for stylized artwork. I think that's a misconception. Appeal has to do with much more than just stylized artwork. So let's investigate and let's look at specific ingredients that can enhance appeal. I know before it was too like super vague and everything. We're gonna get a little more specific now. All right, so one point that I really love and that was really on my mind when I made this list is rhythm or direction, flow, kind of. And after I made this list, actually just as a side point, I found that a lot of these points are called design principles, and I actually didn't even know that. And when I saw a lot of them on the list of design principles that I found afterwards, I was like, oh, good thing my intuition was like leading me to on the right path, right? Because these things that make imagery work are they're just present and we feel them and they're like rediscoverable. Do you know what I mean by that? It's like even if you forget what they are, you could intuit them again and find them again. Even if the list disappeared from human history, we'd be able to intuit them and discover them again. So this artwork is by Yun Ling. I'm not going to be saying all the names. I just uh, just again pointing out that we're going to be looking at other people's artwork and admiring how they use the points we're going to be pointing out. So these to me feel like an excellent use of rhythm and direction flow. It's because both inside and outside the silhouette, we have these rhythms and directional flows that provide energy, dynamism. They draw the eye. They describe surface. I guess in this image, they don't necessarily describe the surface. Maybe in these, like the smoke, you know, kind of ball. But it's more just, this is more just like a general description of like what this element or design principle can do. So you'll see that throughout the presentation, we have like a little description of what it can do sometimes. And then I'll like point out where I see the flows or another point inside the image. So these are kind of these flows that this image feels like it has to me. And this stuff is not accidental, you know, like when Yun was making this, he probably was very intentional about this. And I feel like he started at a simple, probably like a simple starting point where these rhythms were already present. And then he just kind of sculpted the image into its final form, right? But always keeping in mind these basic things that it has going for it and feeding back into them, like with even the smaller shapes, pointing even more into these directions. And honestly, I think that this is a super important one that a lot of times, to be very honest, if an artwork doesn't have good rhythm or direction flow kind of handling in its making, I'm instantly uninterested. And if it does have it, I'm like hooked. I'm just like, oh, that's so cool. It's so energetic and dynamic, and it's so beautifully done and designed, and it's masterful. You know, it's like juicy. It's something that really gives it life to me. And this is a point that I'm really trying to improve at constantly. So yeah, it's just very interesting to me, you see. And the, like for example here, how the heads of the characters are placed along this line, this super strong line, and then their bodies, I mean, of course, like if you have a head and you have limbs, your limbs at their the point at which they meet your body tend to form arrows towards your head, right? It's like kind of like just stuff that happens anyway. But use these things, like use the fact that things point towards a certain place, arrange things conscientiously of like how you can use those to strengthen your image. So don't be like placing the limbs in places that interrupt the rhythm or like don't contribute to it. So just keep in mind that these things can, you know, you can use them to your great advantage instead of just having them fall wherever they do, if that makes sense. So yeah. Here, just another image that presents a lot of flow and awesome, masterful use of rhythm and direction flow. And especially in sequences that have movement or that represent movement in various sequential frames, the fact that this character is coming down into here, and then all the way he's positioned and even the way that the effects flow into the image, they all, and even the fact that this is up here and the head here is a little lower, just a little lower, and then this is a little lower and a little lower, these things all contribute to the way we read and feel the action. And so especially if you're going to be like these images, for example, this one and this one, they both are like in the middle of an action. And so that's why it's even more important that they feel like the composition is influenced by the action they're trying to represent, because it is literally like a frame in the a pause, like a split second in the middle of an action. But even if you're painting something static or that isn't necessarily moving, you do want it to feel alive. Actually, if you specifically didn't want it to feel alive and you did want it to feel static, like eerily static or dead, then you could go against these points and make it feel static on purpose. So the more you know about these things, the more you can use them or not use them in the right circumstances, and that's like determined by you, right? And your judgment. So I just want to have some water for a second. All right. Another point to look at is size. And in general, size can relate to a lot of things. So understand like the different ways in which size can be used. One of them is hierarchy. Another design principle that's really strong and that's really important, and I'm always trying to focus on, is big, medium, small. And these things are funny because we'll think that we understand big, medium, small, and we're like, yeah, 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 I always hear it, I know it, I get it. But then in our artwork, it'll just not come out as strong as it should or could. And I'm noticing that definitely recently. Like a lot of these points, I'll think I have acquired them, and I'll be like, actually, I don't do it good enough yet, or I don't do it as strongly as I would like to. So anyways, so back to it. So size can have to do with hierarchy, big, medium, small, scale, visual interest, etc. So let's look at a few examples and see how size is contributing to these images. So I think that these are all really good examples of size because there's like a really good hierarchy of the way that the shapes are sized compared to other shapes inside the image, or just compared to the negative space as well. And it's either like it's present in so many ways. Like for example, the details are very small on this tree, and the silhouette of the tree is like a medium size. Here the details on the building are small, and the silhouette is medium to large. You know, the negative space is quite large. Here on this one, this little window and the little character, especially these tiny little chickens over here that Tom sometimes adds, all these tiny little things are secondary, right? So they're smaller, and they draw the eye because there's not that, I mean, the detail frequency inside the bricks and structure as well is like pretty small. So it just kind of, sorry for going back and forward again. Just kind of notice, like, there's no specific rule to, you should make these things large and these things medium and these things small. It's more just using it in a way that feels structured within itself, like within the image, the sizes and the like I don't know how to exactly word it because I don't want to make up some kind of rule. It's more of an intuition thing to have or to develop, where you're taking into account the size and you're making decisions like that are coherent to themselves, and that you're creating like a size logic within your image or within the world you're creating. Like that's the kind of thing I want to communicate with this point here. And here's something else about size. Like in these two images, size to me is working differently than it does in these. In these two images, it's more like a narrative element, because in these images, for example, in this first one, the size is an element that lends it lends the object scale. As like when we look at this, we think about, oh, I know the size of a mouse or of a small rodent, and then you see the hand and then you see the sword, and because you're creating these connections in your mind between things you know about and how they're represented inside the image in terms of size, you feel a certain way about it than you would if you were looking at other elements of different sizes and making different types of emotional and narrative connections. In this image, the lighting and atmosphere and the environment, sorry, spoiler. Okay, sorry. In this image, the environmental elements, the lighting and the atmosphere lend scale. So the pillars here, we know usually that if a building is going to have pillars, and especially if it's going to have, if it's going to be so large that we can kind of feel fog moving through it, that it's probably quite large. And also we have another thing here, lending scale, which is a human silhouette. So the way that these things, that the elements present inside the image communicate the scale of the monster painted, is something that super emphasizes, exaggerates, and like pushes the scale of this creature. So it's like an emotional effect created through communicating size. And to me, that's the way that, like the way that the elements inside these images are communicating size really enhances their appeal. So I think that's something to pay attention to. And also, in this one, for example, I think that the size of the detail and the amount of detail and kind of the hierarchy and the way that the like the in terms of big, medium, small, the big is probably the negative space and kind of the clouds around this big guy, and the medium is just kind of like the large silhouette shape, the large overarching like enveloping shapes of what's going on. And then the small is like all the detail, these little specks, these little, I forgot what they're called, sorry, I forgot what those are called, embers, I think. And all the little stuff over here, the little skin detail, the boils and things on the skin, the textures, and all these tiny branches here. This has so much, not only direction, you know, like flow, but it also has just a lot of detail frequency. So there's a lot of information here in terms of small detailed things next to each other, like grouped next to each other. And it's no surprise to me that in this image, these branches and these things are not just all over the place, you know, like these branches here, and in their amount and in their detail level and in their size, are not peppered all the way throughout the image. And that's on purpose. It's because that we're supposed to feel instantly when we lay our eyes upon this image that we're supposed to be looking up towards here, like it kind of draws us into that point up there. And if we're looking there, we're looking at the focal point. And then we can travel around afterwards, you know, and look at other points. But this image is appealing and successful because of its use of size hierarchy, I think, and other elements, of course. But that's one of them. So in these, I want to present an idea that I think I used to have a lot of issues with when I was starting out, and this is something you kind of don't even notice until you notice it, and then when you do, you're like, whoa, that's really important. And I think it's something that a lot of students maybe don't understand, or people who are starting out, or it's like a problem that they're not fixing in their artwork, and then they're wondering like, something feels off or something doesn't work about my image, but I don't know what. And this might be it. So it's the thing that these three images have working for them, and these are not, basically the problem I'm going to talk about is not present in these images, and that's why I want to discuss them. So they have a coherent use of size. The thing I mean is that the sizes of the elements inside in each respective image is, there's like a logic to it. And so the world that first I just want to say kind of there's size is taken into account in their overall silhouette as well, but also the relative sizes of the elements inside each image, like the thickness of something, or the like where it is and how much of it there is, and how large it is compared to other things on the costume or on the face, you know, kind of like the logic of the proportion of it. So the thicknesses, the distribution, the proportion, etc. Like a lot of different types of size rules or size logic is all coherent. And the reason that that's so important is that, say you were to move like the medic from the first image, say you were to put his belt buckle or his glasses or his chin or something on one of the other images, or something like that, like maybe his collar, I don't know, something, or his ear, anything that you would put onto one of the other images would probably feel out of place. And even if you painted it in the same style, it wouldn't have the same logic or rules that were set up to make each of these feel like it's part of its own world. So I think for people who already know about this, I'm like harping on for, like, I'm just saying a lot of stuff that doesn't matter because you already know what it means and you already know why it's important. But if you don't really know about this and you don't think about it very often, this can seem like, for me, like when I started noticing this kind of logic and the fact that that's a very important element to keep something coherent within itself, is like, oh wow, okay, like I can't just have all these different size things or elements that have different logic to them, because when you set up a visual language for an image or for a show or for a movie, it has to be coherent unless you're trying to create different styles within itself. Like, for example, in Soul, the movie Soul, which is the best, awesome, it has like two different visual styles, right? So when you create a visual language and it comes with these things like the size, the way the colors are treated, whatever, etc. But size is very important because, as you can see, it has a lot to do with something looking like itself, if that makes sense. Like it separates it from another thing that hopefully when you create an image, you're creating a size logic, so it's coherent within itself. Anyways, so the next point is depth, and depth is really good because obviously it can make us feel like there's something beyond this image, like it's a bigger world. It's not just a flat representation. And actually, you don't have to use depth if you want. If you want flatness, that is a, like, the omission of depth is another purposeful design decision that you could make, and it can be equally interesting. But it's good to know different. It's good to look at different ways that different artists either indicate and suggest depth, or like literally have it present in the image. So these are, to me, some good examples of depth, and a lot of it has to do with the layering that they do. So, for example, the clouds in, let's look at the center image by Paul Felix. There's these clouds that are overlaid above this mountain and town, and you can feel that they're in front of, like, one and two. One is the clouds and two is the mountain and the town. So you can feel that one thing is in front of the other. And because you can feel that, as well in the other images, like the bushes are in front of the other bushes on the third image, or this roof here is in front of the rest of the village. The fact that you can feel this space because of the overlap of different elements really helps us feel like there's a space here. There's something beyond just like a representation of like one thing, you know. It just helps it gives it like brings us in, it makes us wonder about this world. So yeah. Again, if you know about this stuff, it might just seem like I'm saying a lot of stuff that doesn't matter, but I really do. I want to harp on like how important these points are. So hopefully, you know, it's interesting. So depth. Sorry, I forgot to point out the things that I have associated to depth. So there's cues for depth like repetition, overlap and layering, atmosphere, as well as perspective and ground plane. So you don't necessarily have to have perspective present in the image, or like accurate perspective depiction, to indicate depth. So just understand that like you can have both. In these artworks, I feel like there's a really nice tactile feeling of the depth. Like these, the first ones had more of an overlapping kind of depth, where it's like this element is in front of this one, which is in front of that one. But these other images have more of a you can feel more like their surfaces and the depth receding into the space that there, because the thing is in 2D imagery there isn't actually space here. The illusion is so awesome, right? Like we're looking at a 2D plane, but because of the indication that the artist made us feel these surfaces receding into space, notice how we're drawn into the image and we feel the space, like the space is created in our mind as an illusion. So if you imagine these spaces, the way that the artist dealt with them pulls you in or makes you feel like there's a tangible ground plane or makes you understand the direction of the elements because of surface information that's present in the painting. Like on this third image, let's just go back. Here, all on these pieces of wood and on these pieces of wood, there is like information present in the, it's pretty simple rendering, but it's beautiful and it's very effective, you know, where the marks that are made on these surfaces or the way that they're painted, like the strokes are laid down, indicates that these are pointing in very specific directions. And because the artist had this consideration and included this information, we can feel depth. So these things are indicated in the way that they dealt with it. So again, like the something I want to bring, like an idea I mentioned before, is that things don't have to be painted in like the most perfect way where you zoom in and you can tell that that's the best piece of wood ever or that's the best rock ever. Like that doesn't matter. You can stylize things and you can simplify and exaggerate certain things, and like you can omit some information and exaggerate other pieces of information, like the wood grain here, and you know, such like whatever you want to communicate with this image. You know, understand that like what things you're trying to evoke to the viewer. So yeah, in character art you can have a lot of depth as well, and that usually comes with like the way you pose the character, to make the way you pose the character, and also kind of like the angle of view, as if you were like a camera looking at them. That can really exaggerate the depth even more, like make certain things feel like they're really far from each other. But even really simple overlaps or just something being moved closer to the viewer or further from the viewer is a very, very effective way to communicate depth. And I find it such a creative way to make the viewer feel like they're in the same space as the character they're looking at. And it's just so clever. I really love it. And also, for example, in this image, there's a really awesome use of focal depth, like a camera blurring some elements out, so it feels like there's a like a, what's it called, focal depth, yeah. So you feel like you're a camera and you understand this kind of communication of the language, like the visual language of cameras and distance. So you know that there's a slice of space within which certain things are sharp and other things are blurry. And so, you know, the more information that you can, that like you find interesting to add, that indicates what you want to indicate, you know, go for it, because it's really cool. So yeah, this layering. All right, so let's look at some other character images that have depth information. And I wanted to show like some characters you can use their props and the way they're holding something to indicate depth. But also in the third example here, I find that, well, actually, you don't need props. I don't want to say that, but you can use it as an element. But I wanted to just point out that in this third image, I know she has like a veil over her arms, but even so, like pretend she didn't have that veil. If there was just her arms placed in front of her face in the way that she has them, even that is like a genius way to very simply indicate a lot of depth, because we feel that, like as a viewer, we feel the indication of there's this veil, and then there's these arms. Like even if there was just the arms, it provides depth, and it can feel like something quite simple or not really important to add into an image, but it really adds a some kind of tangible element where our brain, I think, I don't know, like if the information is presented in an appealing way, we definitely enjoy and feel the space more, because like her leg is overlapping her other leg, and her arm is overlapping her other arm, and her face, and there's like a sense of mystery, there's a sense of space, there's just this like really appealing handling of depth, along with, you know, everything else is working really beautifully in the image. But yeah, there's so yeah, like use these different cues and different ways in which you can suggest depth. And even with a simple situation, like I said, like just a character, or even just, I think with props as well, you can think of ways you can overlap or pose things to indicate depth, and just kind of bring the viewer in that way. Yeah. um, so these are like kind of just giving an order to things, you know, like how this leg comes first, kind of, it's the closest thing to us, and then there's the hand, and then there's that leg, and kind of like the feeling of the space that these parts of the character take up, like this head is in front of that chest, you know, you can really feel it because of the lighting, just all of the way it's handled. And here the values are subdued, and the arm that's behind as opposed to the arm that's in front, it really helps push the feeling of depth. And then the smoke is behind the character, whereas this like piece of smoke here is in front. There's just so many things that add depth, that as like a beginner, if there was a beginner looking at this image and trying to break it apart to make a study, or just think of how they can gather information from this piece, to learn about it, they might not pick up on these things as much. So yeah, once again, just that's kind of why I'm trying to, you know, push these connections to you guys, in case, you know, in case that these are things you're not quite picking up on yet. So, and if you are, then awesome, that's so cool. Like for me, picking up on all these points more and more over time has been such a satisfying learning experience. Yeah, because I try to integrate this stuff, you know. Okay, so the next point that I really love, you know, I love all of them. They're all really great, and they're all really fascinating and interesting to try to get better at. You know, so grouping. You can group shapes, values, colors, temperature. You know, so on. And I find that for this specific image, the grouping helps so much in the narration of this. What's going on in this image? They're kind of traveling inside a cave, and there's this creature outside the cave, or behind them, and the grouping of the values really helps tell us what's inside and what's outside. And that's it can seem like a simple piece of information, but because the longer you, like on first glance, you can feel inside and outside. And on second read, or depending on your psychology, I guess, maybe the first read is, oh, scary demon. And then second is like inside and outside. Um, Whatever it is, though, the connection of inside and outside to safe, small, friendly looking characters and mean demon looking guy, those two pieces of information being communicated so well through the grouping and the painting, um, is part of how this image feels like psychologically to look at. You know, the fact that these guys better go inside to the safety is communicated even more powerfully through the organization of the values being grouped. So not only is it visually appealing, but it also pushes the narrative. So that's why it's really important to use these things. Yeah, so interior, exterior, layered space, separation. Yeah, like layered space, I guess, is like because you feel the different layers of things in this space. You know, it kind of adds to the depth as well. Like this log is in front of whatever's over there, and the log is also like kind of in front of them because they're on top of it, behind it, in perspective. Yeah, and just the separation of things, you know. And sorry, as well as like there's other elements too that add to the feeling of like a layered space with a lot of depth. Okay, so I wanted to show these images for an awesome temperature and value grouping. Like these little fireflies in this image, they stand out so well inside this dark grouped patch of values here. They, like, the reason those stand out is that all of the other values around them are so dark, and that stuff is done on purpose. and just the temperature here, like this is nice and cool overall, and this is so warm and sunny feeling. So it's not, like I said, it's again, it's like it is visually appealing. It makes the image look good, but it also communicates something about the way the space is and the way the space feels. Like you can feel the way the sun is, kind of the way the sun feels warm over here, probably, I mean, I'm guessing. And then over here it feels more like a lush, um, obscured area, and the vegetation might be thicker up here, might be obscuring this creature more, when the sun is more of like a safety, you know, more of like a warm, safe thing. And then like, don't come too close to this guy. He's in the dark, cool, shadowy area, you know. So it's kind of just communicating all these other little things on top of like looking really good when you make these types of decisions. And here, for example, the character is so warm. He has like rosy cheeks and a red, you know, it's Santa Claus. He has like a red suit, and then all around is this cool temperature and just feeling of like iciness, you know. But he feels warm and friendly, maybe. So yeah. So it can do a lot of things on top of just being appealing. And here, for example, the areas of shadow versus the areas of light, they look really good and they're beautifully sculpted on the characters. And they also just, they tell us a lot about the volumes, you know. And also in the way he handled painting it, he handled the areas that are in shadow differently than he handled the areas that are in light, or he handled the areas that are in detail, the like focal area differently than the areas that are not the focal area. But they all still have this kind of consideration of the grouping of values and light. This one I feel like strengthens the mood a lot because it's such an interesting shape, and this character's face is like in shadow and this one's in light. It's kind of, there's this storytelling mood thing happening through the way that the light and the shadow are grouped. And like on top of it, it's just another iteration of the same point, where it's not just visually appealing, but it also tells even more of a story. And here here I feel like the grouping of the values in the shadows strengthens the form a lot, or like communicates the form really well, really effectively, because the adherence to like a logic that is holding together like what type of value range are the shadows and what type of value range are the lights is just very masterfully executed in this image, you know. So it really helps communicate to our mind the form. And another point I want to bring up is contrast. And I took this screenshot from a Tyler Edlin video. I think you should check out Tyler Edlin's videos on YouTube. He has really, really great educational content, as also on his Patreon. This is not paid or anything. I just think Tyler's a great teacher. And I wanted to bring highlight on his contrast video, because he has um, a great I guess discussion, or a great breakdown of contrast. Because when you first hear contrast, um, you might think just of like value or color contrast, but there's so many types of contrast, and it's fascinating. And just considering it when you make images, or when you look at images, or when you look outside, you know, when you get inspiration, it's an awesome point to consider, I feel like, and it's really exciting and useful. So here I wanted to show a few different examples of contrast. In this one, I feel like it's about the size. So the size of this lily pad compared to the other lily pads around the characters, they have a significantly larger one. And that kind of inherently tells a story. Like our brains are usually wired to think about similarity versus differences. And if something is different, we're like alert, you know. So we're more likely to look at these characters if they are placed on a lily pad that is slightly different in size, or very different than the elements around it. If they were on one of the same size, who knows, maybe it would take our eye a little longer to reach the character. Or, I mean, we're usually human and character and animal wired anyway, you know, to look there first. But it might have been a different reality if the sizes were different, like more similar. In this one, I find this an awesome example that Ian did here, because oftentimes it almost feels like a formula to blur what's in the background and to have very sharp what's in the foreground. But that's why I love this image so much, because he's blurring what's in the foreground because it's moving. Like he really wants us to feel that movement with this motion blur here. And actually, we kind of go to look at these guys because there's a blur here. I mean, we still like right away notice this thing a lot because it has these like sharp, vibrant kind of contrast and colors, but the blur tells a story, and it's like it's a type of contrast. So the sharpness here versus the softness over here with the motion blur, as well as the, there's various levels of depth created by contrast of values. And just this image is like I mean, they're all really masterful, I find, but it's just such an interesting use of contrast, in different ways, like not only color and value, but also the softness of the edges because of the blur. It's really awesome. And this one, it's more about the directional contrast. I feel like there's a strong diagonal flow in all of the like organic elements in this image. And then there's these little characters here, I think, that are upright, and this larger upright element, but it still has like a diagonal element overlaid over it. So these things stand out. Okay, I guess that's a flower actually. But anyways, the thing is that most of this image has like medium-sized things going diagonally and fluidly. And then there are a few things that are upright that draw our eye simply because they're contrasting from the rest of the general feeling of the image. And this is another contrasting image, like just mostly in the values and colors. So in the focal area, we have this like really strong contrast here, and over here the sky against the mountain, and back over here where we're not meant to look at instantly. Our eye might travel over here, but it's not the focal area. The contrast is reduced. And so it's just a beautiful handling of contrast, across all these images. So value, saturation, texture, the edge, size, direction, shape. So there's all kinds of contrast. And it's so fascinating to use, whatever feels most appropriate in the situation, or what you're having fun contrasting. Ulyss does these great studies where he really exaggerates hard and soft and like different shapes. So I find that awesome, and I find this image so great because it's like a really stylized, pushed image, and it can feel so simple, but it's really deceptive, right? Because it's actually very complex and like beautifully designed. The consideration of blur and cinematic feeling, and like the way they organize the way the detail and information is organized, and presented, with the softness and hardness, is fascinating. Like the back part of this tiger feels so close because of the blur, and then this part and this character are in sharp focus, making it feel like this part of the tiger, the shoulders and the head, are so close to this guy, because the only things that are sharp are his shoulders here and the guy. So they're like, they're neck and neck about to fight. So it's just like, it's like an emotional message, from the use of contrast. So the edges, the way the background stuff is over here, and these edges and these colors too, crazy color contrast here. Yeah, good stuff. Another set of awesome, these are more like color-based contrasts, and they really pop. I love them. Like the first one is just like a awesome temperature difference, and all the things that are gold and like the riches and the treasures buried here are here, and then all the other stuff is like ruin, more gray. Over here it's communicating like a certain time of day, and that's like a very emotional, beautiful storytelling type of thing. This like feels really magical versus the rest. It feels like it's like a sunset towards the end of the day, and the only things that are still really bright and popping are like the sunlight and this like magical energy here from the board. I think it's like Eureka 7 inspired, and I love that. Yeah, so here, just like things that happen because of the sun, right? Like, and lighting, and that kind of stuff is really beautiful and very emotionally powerful, I find. Yeah, so awesome use of contrast. And another one is division of space. So compositionally, like the way you handle areas of rest versus areas of detail and their transitions, to me is a super fascinating point. I love it. Again, I love all these, but this one is so cool because I feel like when I started noticing this, I started falling in love with just like the way certain artists handled like the little drop off of detail, the way that they organize and place little speckles of things, and like you can place even just the way someone would arrange different dots like in a certain group of dots and then have them go off into nothing. You can make that a beautiful arrangement, and I find maybe it's kind of like an artist's thing only, to appreciate just the way someone would place dots on a piece of paper very satisfyingly, but it can become so beautiful, like the way you group things, and you transition through them. So here there's not a lot of detail, and here there is a lot of detail, so we really look to these areas, and there's like a directional flow to the way that the division of space is organized. And this is a coming together of a lot of these points we've been talking about. So I love how like they interact and they contribute to each other, and they help the image read really beautifully. And here, this is like one of those things I was talking about, like just the way you arrange like little dots and textures and details can be like a fascinatingly beautiful expression, a beautiful visual expression. So these are just images where I find that the space was handled beautifully. The detail versus rest and transitions are like just so well handled. Like there's more here, less here, more here, like more here in this little silhouette here, and then less over here. More over here. Here there's like a big focal point of like all these little things meeting together, and here there's less. And the fact that they're grouped in these ways and organized in certain areas of the image is just like a beautiful artistic decision. Yeah. And here the way that the folds collect, and the way that these legs have no detail on them whatsoever, it's just a beautiful clean silhouette. It's like very elegant. And this is an image that always comes to mind whenever I think of division of space. This one comes to mind right away, and it's just so clear to me, like the way that this roof is handled. So it's like deceptively simple and beautiful. And I don't know how Mike feels about this image. Maybe he thinks it's like no big deal and like, get over it, Iris. But to me, the way that these tiles are drawn, like the fact that they're over here, you feel each tile, and then he just has a few little marks here, like indicating, what to do, you know what I'm trying to say to you about these tiles. I don't have to draw every single one. And just the way he organized the drop off of information is like beautiful to me. And just, yeah, I just love the way people handle the transitions. It's just such a beautiful thing, and I think it's a really important thing to gain style and flavor and consideration with, because it can really help something feel like you're expressing it rather than just representing something, just very factually or mathematically. You can really feel like the artist's voice is coming through. Yeah. So more and less, and also just like these images to me feel like great representations of areas of detail versus areas of rest. Again, like here there's a lot of detail, and here there's areas of rest in the costume. Here there's a big nice area of rest, and here over here there's a nice area of rest. And then just the way that the detail is distributed, and here there's an area of rest, versus other areas of detail. Because like say you only had areas of rest, or you only had areas of detail, I feel like there would be some kind of feeling of like it's not as good as it could be. So if you could like distribute things differently, it would look better, as these artists have done. Yeah. Okay, so another point I think is really important is negative space. And basically okay, so let's see what I wrote. How it affects one element or creates a relationship between multiple elements. So yeah, the negative space can kind of communicate something about a certain element. It can make it feel a certain way if it's very isolated or if it's connected to other things. And the way that the space is shaped and carved kind of can make the viewer feel a certain way. Like for example, I really love, and I feel like it really contributes to the way that the first image feels. This one by Jamie Jones here, that the character's head doesn't like our eye does go to it because we're wired to think about like heads and humans, you know. But the instant, like on split second, just binary like negative space read on this image is more about like the horse and the river, you know. And value wise, the knight character joins the mountain more like on first read, you know. And I find that that has a heavy storytelling feel to it. It might not be true, but I think that it adds like a somber sadness to it, or some kind of feeling of potential defeat, or just traveling. Like it's not necessarily, oh, a heroic knight. Like there's something kind of melancholic about the image, and to me that's simply because of this joined dark shape up here, you know. And just, I'm not sure if that's intended or if I'm reading it wrong, but to me that's a very interesting narrative potential, at least, you know. And the negative space to me helps contribute to that. And here again, just like very interesting shapes in terms of negative space. I think that the way that these things are carved to emphasize certain things is like really fascinating. And to me, the fact that we have more strong sense of negative space in the reflection than in the so like real part of the image, you know, where it's not reflection, is very fascinating as a visual decision. I think it's like very beautiful. And here the character pops out of this silhouette of this robot here, and she pops out like really cleanly, and she's also very small. One second, I'm just gonna close my window because it's very loud. Okay, next. Yeah, so can give rhythm, importance, tell story. Negative space can do a lot of things. In these images, I feel like it's very beautifully in giving kind of like an envelope around the characters and the elements, you know, the different elements, like the way that the an like a convex part of the silhouette will be at a certain position, and then it will kind of get carved into, the silhouette will get carved into by negative space, but then there'll be another point later on inside the silhouette, and then the negative space kind of like curves across those 2 points, similarly to what we have over here, like this part of the tail and then the back and this kind of bulge here. I feel, I mean, these are things that to me feel really important in the way that elements are placed inside the composition. And I'm pretty sure that artists are all like subconsciously, unconsciously placing things in a specific way so that there is this kind of like continuity and like wrapping effect, you know, like there's like a satisfying kind of envelope around the shape, and it has like a nice overarching rhythm. I feel like these things are more often than not considered, you know, when the art feels very masterfully done and a lot of things are considered and the composition is like beautifully handled. More often than not, I find that this type of thing is present, like these overarching like negative space and silhouette kind of interactions, you know. So yeah, you can just create these relationships between the things, and also like something popping out of the general space and stuff like that. Okay, so another point I wanted to bring up is 2D read versus 3D read, you know, or both. So I think that it's important to think about which one's your priority and keeping them both working for you, like when you want to. And so in this case, I think that these characters and creatures have a really, really strong graphic 2D silhouette kind of read, but there's still 3D form present, you know, like the way that this dragon or wyvern, I'm not sure, is kind of wrapping up over here. We can feel him kind of going forward and backward in space, and we know the indication of the volume that Satoshi is trying to communicate, because he's an expert at, you know, drawing this. He's a very good artist, and we can feel the thing he's trying to emphasize and communicate in terms of form. But the 2D read is so strong and appealing and like flattened kind of, that the 3D form is still there, and the 2D read is so strong and appealing that they just connect in such a beautiful, satisfying way. And to me, this is like a very, very beautiful handling Like, I think that if somebody was trying to imitate him and they didn't have such a good ability to communicate 3D in a very 2D way, they wouldn't be quite catching up on, like, uh, you know, exactly what makes it so good, what makes his artwork so good. So yeah, you need to like, you need to know what you're representing, even with a very 2D read. And yeah, these are just different situations where I feel like the way that the image has been rendered or handled or drawn is a really great indicator of like 2D and 3D. So here we feel like, the thickness of things. Oh, sorry. We can feel the thickness of these elements, where they are in space, kind of. And there's all these little considerations. And here, the volumes, the way the character is drawn, or the creature, or the tree, the way it's just the way the volumes are. Sorry, sorry, I keep going the wrong slide. The way that the volumes are represented in the rendering and in the drawing is just beautifully handled. And here, like, this feels so three-dimensional. And this one, you can really feel the volumes of this like rounded mech suit kind of thing. Yeah. And okay, and in photography as well, I just wanted to point out that like the way you kind of see and learn from the photograph can also, you can also consider like, is the nature of the photograph or of the reference teaching me a lot about a 2D kind of like, can I interpret it in a more 2D way or in a more 3D way, like, or is it inherently more 2D or 3D? Like, I feel like the one on the left, sorry, the one on the right, the wolf feels very 2D because he's more of like a profile view, and the first one you really feel depth because there's such an overlap of his face and his arm in front of the rest of his body. So you can really feel like the way that things are set into each other, like the face goes into the neck, into the torso, and the arm is like into the chest. Whereas this is more about like the 2D side view and like what does like a whole leg look like, rather than this kind of um, much more, from a different angle kind of view. So yeah. And I want to talk about material as well. That's another point that we can use to enhance appeal and tell a story. So the brushwork in this image, to me, it indicates the texture of the elements and like what is the feeling of the different parts of this image, the different elements. Like here it's like grassy and grainy, and it feels kind of like dry and like a very noisy kind of thing, like when you see dry grasses and there's a lot of them and they're very fuzzy and wild. And then over here you can feel like trees and it feels more distant, and then the clouds feel like soft and but also sculpted in some areas. And there's just these different textures and considerations for the different parts of the image, and it really helps push the content and the story and the way we feel as we look at it. And here I find like, I love when an artist, especially Sunmin, will give a lot of the like heightened reality with the way that they handle textures. I feel like it adds interest. I wrote there, it adds visual interest, dimension, and personality. Like, I feel like you can tell either the artist's personality or just that story, that project, that movie. If it's viz dev for a specific thing, like what's the personality that they want that project to like vibrate or to evoke. So I feel as if just the way that the textures are handled through this image tells us something about, how it feels, how it's like nostalgic in a way, it's like childlike, and, or it can tell us about ways that Sunmin likes to, paint and the kind of brushes she likes to use. It could be as simple as that, or it can go into like, expressing a story. So yeah, it's very awesome. And you can consider different textures and treatment. They can indicate material, flesh, roughness. Like here we have like the strong feeling of like subsurface scattering, with the blood running through the wing and the ear. And here this is like, we feel like I just love this image, the roughness and the skin of the like thick dirty rough skin of the elephant comes through so strong here. And we can just feel like it's had a long day at a festival, you know, and it's dusty. There's like kicking up some dust in the air, and it's just really beautifully communicated, you know. And here the leaves, they just feel so leafy, and I don't know, just really beautiful work, you know, when you see artists like considering these things in a beautiful way. So yeah, just consider like different attributes, you know, of the material and the way you communicate the texture. So yeah. Also, so another point is palette, and basically I want to, like, you don't necessarily have to make a palette very designed and very expressive and push it into like surreal, but just notice, like, is the palette that I'm using, um, am I using it intentionally to make something feel more like real world and grounded, or am I pushing it further into like a very expressive art directed like specific mood, designing it, you know. So is it strengthening the appeal, story, and mood, and is it kind of distorting reality in a way, or is it, you know, sticking more to just like the world we know and the colors we might expect to see, uh, with less art direction? So this is kind of like just different situations where the palette is very designed, or for example in this one it really feels like the way this might feel, you know, like a little light bulb, an incandescent light bulb in this small space. um, and this one the palette just feels so cold and like morbid and alone, you know. So not only is the image itself, like the content of the image, communicating these points, but so is the palette. And without that super designed palette, I feel like these images would be less appealing. But it's a good thing they do have this palette because they're so appealing. So yeah, they intensify temperatures. Oh yeah, and they also give the location an identity. The thing is that, like, when you have a certain location in a in sorry, what's it called? What's it called? Okay, like a material, any kind of material that is oh my god, I can't believe I forgot. But like one scene and then another scene, you know, like in a comic, or a sequential, yeah, in a sequential story, or a game or anything like that. You want the palette and other elements too, the shapes, the colors, the sizes of things, the type of details, everything. But palette is a very strong like location identity kind of thing. For example, like in Ori, in the game Ori, like if you are in a certain location, you'll kind of remember it because of the colors it has there, and the specific combination of colors that are there and not elsewhere. So the fact that you have like specific palettes associated to different areas in a short, in a long, in a sorry, in a full length animation, like whatever kind of material, whatever kind of project it is, the fact that you have like a specific palette to a specific place or to a specific character, or every time a specific mood comes about, these things are very purposeful decisions, and you can use this, you know, to enhance your image making. And so these are two examples I feel that really represent like a more nostalgic, real life, childhood, like sweet kind of thing. And then this is like surreal, like really intense, like crazy kind of situation, you know. And even if they, even if the images already represent like what's in the image is representing that feeling as well, the palette like comes and further clarifies or intensifies it even more, you know. So the palette is either like just coherent with what's already there, or like really contributing a lot. So yeah. And you can go really moody and like refer to different times of day or magical feelings, you know. Like, so I feel like my friend Leroy here uses a lot of teal and like mauve kind of colors, and these kind of things, there's certain colors that to you or to someone else might feel like they're more easily associated to like magical situations, or something like that, you know. Like if you really like nature, you'll probably use a lot of green, and things like that. Just like what make different associations to different colors, you know. And like how you express light and emotion and magic like with colors. So As well as that, like, you can make things feel like it's a natural exterior kind of situation, or it's an interior and it's very artificial. For example, with this kind of thing on the right here, this feels very like artificial lighting, and this feels very real light outside, you know, with the sun. And this is just awesome. This is so inspiring. Just the way people handle light is so beautiful. It just, the way that they create specific contexts and refer to different times of day, or just certain atmospheres, certain clarities of air, humidity, you know, all kinds of different aspects of, like, here it's like a warm end of the day or beginning of the day, you know, and this is like an evening and it's like romantic because of these lights. There's just different emotional associations we have to these things, you know, and you can pick up on those and include them in your artwork. And also you can suggest different weather conditions, you know, which always contributes like to a feeling that a place has, or, you know, time of day, like I said here. Yeah, just different feeling through the palette, and it's a lot of it is connected, you know, to the colors that they're using. So another element I want to bring out is story. And I know it doesn't specifically relate to appeal, but I just find it's like a very successful thing, at least in, you know, in visual development and in concept art. You want to think of like how the story is being expressed by the elements depicted, you know. There's many aspects of it. Like, so let's look at the list up there. So you can be like the way things are interacting, or characters are interacting, or objects, or whatever. Can be emotional, uh, something is emotionally depicted inside the image, the light, the time of day, the role of the viewer is an interesting aspect as well. And you curate kind of the objects and the environment that are represented inside the image. So you select the what you want in the image, and you can imply that something's going on, like a specific action or a story, or like you can also uh, not imply at something, but you can also like imply mystery, or like ask the viewer to wonder about what's happening, you know, who is somebody and stuff like that. Like, what it makes you feel like, what is this place like? This place feels misty and mysterious, and how does this character interact with this world, you know, like this guy, I think it's Frankenstein. He feels very, in his posture, just in the way he carries himself. One second, I'm just gonna make my camera lighter because I'm getting lost. Pretty funny. Okay. All right. So, just how does this character interact with this world? You know, so he feels in his posture and in the values and colors chosen on him. Like, he's part of the dark part of the image, and in front of him is the light. So these things are narrative hints at how is he. You know, is he kind of a shadowy kind of guy? And just, you know, what is this world like? Like, this place feels very magical, and like it has a lot of depth to it and different heights and things, and, you know, and what is this character experiencing? Like, this image feels quite moody, and the weather and the kind of melancholic shapes and palette contribute to it feeling a certain way. So yeah, the story, you know, should come through. And I included these Kevin pictures because I feel like these characters, the characters inside the images and what's around them, it all just is so coherent. Like, they feel like they are expressions of each other, and it's so beautiful. Like, they're just such a pure expression. The way that the proportions are, the way that the shapes are, the way that the colors are of the things around the characters and inside the characters themselves, like the handling of everything is so well like married, you know. And so it's just such a beautiful understanding of expressing story through all the ways everything else in the image is considered. Is so beautiful. And more. Yeah, so there, all of these points are opportunities to enhance your image, and whether you use something or you use the opposite or the lack of it, it's just not like make sure it's on purpose, but the more purposeful your images and your decisions become, I feel like it's a very satisfying act, to create something and feel like you like sculpted it into the end result that you came to, you know. Or you can also just experiment a lot and see which point you want to enhance a certain way. Like, yeah, there's just so much potential, and I feel like you can develop favorites on these kind of design principles. And at a certain point in time, you might like love, I don't know, using big, medium, small, and at another point in time, you might love to use depth, and just all kinds of different like stages you might go through and think about. And you can revisit and rethink weak points, you know, like when you're looking at when you're looking at imagery you love, or when you're just looking at anything that inspires you, or even just thinking about your own stuff, you can think like, I really would like that if my images had more consideration of lighting or of story or of um, sizes of things inside the image, like a scale or um, whatever, you know, like direction, flow, all kinds of different things. And you could think like it would really help my images communicate more blank, you know, like insert your own kind of idea into, so this element could help me express this, or I could use more practice with this element. And yeah, I'm just, you know, I think it's awesome. So as a just a list of all those things I mentioned, so yeah, consider how these are working to reinforce or weaken appeal in an image. And so there's rhythm, direction, flow, size, depth, grouping, contrast, division of space, negative shape, 2D, 3D read, material, palette, and story. And so there are many more, I think. I think that these are just elements that came to mind to me that felt very important when I was putting together this presentation. I have seen other elements come into play, you know, and I think the other ones exist too. But like I said, this is just like my list for now. And yeah, they're all opportunities, you know, it's really cool. So just think about it. And here are some words on like my own attempts and thoughts on improving and just things like that, considering my own artwork. So, oh, I don't think I wanted to put this slide into here, sorry. But let's look at it anyway. So how am I reacting to what I put on the canvas? So I think about these ideas when I look and think about art and in life, anytime, using more recent pieces to explore tools I want to improve my handle on and understanding the potential of, using my intuition during the creation process to think about what I need to do more, less, better, etc. Also using professional work to observe how the tools relate to the situation. Game, concept, color, script, viz dev. Yeah, okay, so these are kind of, this is just a collection of little ideas I put in here because I at one point was going to call this presentation reacting to what I put on the canvas, and it was kind of like a use all these elements to inform like how do I feel about what my image needs right now, like what's the next step, or what does it need more of, or what does it need less of, or what direction can I push it into, you know. And you kind of just explore all of these things as things you can improve on and you know, emphasize or whatever. So yeah, and you just think about it all the time. Like for instance, in this image, here I'm just gonna make myself disappear for a second. So in this image, I'm practicing light, color, and depth, a few other things too, in a loose manner. So it's kind of like, it's a sketch, it's a loose sketch. But when I'm making this, I'm thinking, okay, like I really want there to be a strong flow in this image of like upward facing things, and I want them to all flow into here, and I want there to be a strong layering suggested through the light and the atmospheric, like the humidity in the air, the mist, kind of the distance. And I want it to feel like it's just like a tropical, there's a strong sunlight and it's very warm, but we're in like a very shadowy part, but I don't want anything to be very well defined either. So it's kind of just an explorative sketch of the way this place feels, more so than like literally how do these plants look, and very like less of a literal interpretation of the space. And here I'm just practicing depth, flow, value grouping. Mostly what I was thinking about in this image was having it feel like these things, like we're hidden in this kind of backspace of these ruins here. We're probably on some like rock or pillar or something, and we're looking at these characters. We're not too far from them, maybe like I don't know, a handful of meters. I don't know how far, but we're behind a few things and we're looking at them, and they're kind of like on a break or something from a travel. And it's kind of like a very mysterious looking area. There's a lot of sand flowing through. And so I just want the depth and flow and value grouping to take the ingredients that I put into the image, which are like ruins and sand, and that's pretty much it, ruins and sand. And just taking these ingredients and like kind of communicating things with the tools that I find interesting. So yeah, this is kind of how I would do it. This is an image that I really liked a lot, and I found it very successful in the way that I handled the brushwork. And I want to talk about why, I guess. So the sets of rhythms that I feel are present in this image, I think make it very appealing, and it's something that I hold into account when I work on things like this, or just try to improve on over time. So there's a lot of little scoopy little rhythms and places where it feels very dynamic and like rounded or like energetically, just kind of moving. It's not static. And also there's like it kind of wraps around itself, or like these two branches here are connected into like a nice curvy kind of shape. So there's all these kind of shapes I'm trying to give it. And while I'm working on it, I'm thinking about that. Like I'll make a shape while I'm working on it to see if it should be that shape or another shape. And every time I try something, I'm thinking, does that have the right kind of like feel with the overall silhouette and rhythm, or does it interrupt, or does it not contribute in the way that I would like it to? And these are all things you kind of feel over time. You develop your intuition with this, you develop your own personal voice and taste with it. So there's no specific right or wrong answer, just depending on the situation and on you. And also I'm trying to do like big, medium, small masses and spaces between things, like basically what I mean by that is that here there's like a small space in between these two branches, here there's like a medium space between these two branches, and here there's like a large negative space. And I find that even the negative space has to be interesting and have different sizes, I guess, of how it cuts into things. So yeah, that's the consideration there. And the transitions of the detail are handled with the nature of the object in mind, which means like this canopy, the tree canopy is made of leaves. And so I wanted the brushwork to communicate leaves in a nice way. And in Clip Studio Paint, love this program, I got like this, I made this beautiful brush, or like I think I modified a brush. I don't generally make brushes from scratch. Once in a while I'll do that, but usually I'll just modify one. So I'll modify like the pressure curve, or the just kind of something about the way it stamps or blends, or the shape it has or whatever. So I got this shape that was very pointed and like an oval, and so it became very easy and organic to make these kind of like leaf shapes with each brush stroke that communicated the nature of the tree very well, I found. And so yeah, the silhouette and the outer rhythms other the silhouette and the outer rhythms are maintained while adding variety. So that means like this kind of stuff, the even the outer part of the tree is communicating that it's made of leaves. And that's really funny part, I find, because uh, my friend was next to me while I was making this, Leroy, and he was telling me like, Iris, I think the silhouette is like too clean, because before it was very, very clean and sharp kind of and round, and I didn't have these little like leaves coming out of it. And he was saying like, you have to make it a little more, well, I don't think he said you have to, but he was saying like it would be more coherent, and like um, if you use the material of the tree, to indicate, around the silhouette a few things that like make it less perfect and sharp. And I was like, at first I was like, no, the rhythm is so nice and clean. And then I was like, actually you're right, I can maintain like the clean shape and the roundness while adding this like nice intricate like detail level, you know. So it's a good balance of like considering different things you want to consider, and that stuff is up to you, you know. Like um, when you receive feedback, you interpret it in a way, you see what it's trying to say, and you know you keep in mind like what you want to consider and what the person is suggesting that you consider more, and you know whether you think that that's right for this image or not, whatever. That's another point, but yeah, so I really like this image. I think it was successful to me. When I say successful, I mean like I liked it. This is one that I don't like at all. I think that it's a total mess. Like it's not really interesting to me at all, and so I don't even show this on my portfolio because I don't like it, or maybe it's like somewhere buried in like an ArtStation post. Um, I'll probably remove it someday. I just don't like this. I don't think it works very well at all. I think that there's too much like of the same size, or first of all, it's just not very interesting to me. It's just an experiment. It's just a sketch, you know. I think that some parts of it are cool and other parts are just kind of like really throwaway. So I think it's interesting to consider like why something might not work or why you don't like it. So in that spirit, let's talk about it just a bit, even though I don't like it. So I was struggling in this image to shift the focus from the upper part to the bottom part because I didn't want it to be about like this and the contrast here between this tree and the back trees. And I feel like there's more focus up here than down here. And I tried to do that by like, I don't know, just creating more contrast over here. I tried to introduce colors to create a different mood. I didn't like the colors I had because I was thinking too like boring, I guess. And I tried like, oh, let's make it more, I don't know, somehow more interesting, but I didn't like it. I think there's something cool about the palette, the way it ended up, but it just needs something more. It needs something else. It's not good enough. It's not. It's like it's not appealing enough to me. So there's a lack of focal point in terms of texture, in terms of visual interest. I feel like when I was painting this, I knew that it was just going all over the place, and that I tried to quiet down areas that were too loud, and it just wasn't working. Like because there was no like I had a focal point in mind, I guess, when I started, and it was like, okay, put something here, or just make this part interesting. But I don't think I did a good enough job, or I didn't push myself enough, or I didn't find like a creative enough solution that I found interesting. So I ended up just feeling like, okay, it's all over the place. I don't like it. It's not interesting. I try to remind myself like, okay, keep this rhythm going in the roots. But yeah, I just ended up very dissatisfied because I don't think it has any hook to it, and it's just something you know, it's just very throwaway, I find. So this is an image I think works well. This character is cool. I mean, to me at least, I like it. I think it has like different rhythms that are considered in terms of like different diagonals and the way that things line up, kind of on the outside. You know, it has a lot of this like triangle kind of shape, and also just the way that things line up inside it too, like some other shapes. So having different like sets of rhythms and lines and leading lines is a good idea, I think, as long as like there is a major and a minor kind of focus, you know. And I think that just in generally in the shape language that I've developed over time, I there's certain things I like about these kind of like scoopy kind of stairway kind of shapes, and I like that. I think it's not for everything, it's not for every project, but it's something that I really like in my own personal kind of shape language. And I think that I really like making silhouette shapes kind of sprout out as if they're kind of like plants or leaves, you know? So this will kind of come out this way, come out that way, little hairs are coming out different directions. So it's kind of like a very like plant life, organic kind of organic material kind of logic that I adopted, I guess, that I like to use. And also, I find that something that adds depth, even though this image doesn't have like a tremendous sense of depth, I feel, and the images I showed you previously from other artists have much more depth and much more like emphasize, like, you know, strong space, like having like the weapon like really in front and super dramatic. But I tried to introduce a little bit of depth in this by having it feel like her arm is, you know, in front of her legs, and she's holding something there, and it's like there's a little bit of an overlap, and the shield is overlapping her other arm. you know. So different elements are overlapping in different ways, and things are like facing different directions as well. You know, her face is turned another way than her chest, and her legs are kind of facing upwards. You can feel that they're bent. So yeah, just there's like different things that are facing different directions. I feel like I made the palette pretty uniform overall, with kind of like a mossy kind of um, like a kind of, I don't know, there's like a foresty kind of colors, and I put a little bit of blue and a little bit of red around areas where I wanted people to look, or I just wanted a pop of like a different kind of feeling. And here I found that the I wasn't too satisfied with the value solution I found for the face. You know, afterwards upon looking at it, it's just like, oh, almost all the values are dark, but the face is light, so it kind of pops right away. You look at it, and there's a little bit of like lighter shapes kind of leading back into here, but it's kind of too simple, you know. But I mean, if something works, it works. So that's kind of how that image worked. In this one, I tried to go for a feeling of like being deep in a forest and the way that the dappled light feels. And I wanted it to feel mysterious, you know, and contribute to the story and the mood that I wanted this image to have. So I think that the value grouping and the focal point and like the sharpness and softness and the palette all kind of contribute in a way to that. Here, I mean, these I'm just looking at sketches. They're not images that I find like spectacular or anything. I think they're okay. But I find that this one has like a strong flow direction. You know, it's like very energetic, and it it kind of has like a very direct like whoosh, like swooshing towards us kind of feeling. And so all the shapes kind of contribute to that. And I tried to get these like fluid feelings through the way that I made the shapes kind of follow each other. And here there's like more detail on the bottom part, like all the detail is over here, and there's no detail up here really. And I, you know, I could have organized it differently. There's no right or wrong really in this. And I've seen other images of dragons and riders with completely different logic, you know. So um, there's no right or wrong. There's just different. And like, this is how I organized this. And I think it works all right, you know. So it's cool. I'm just, so these are things like I don't have, I'm not saying I'm a master of any of these elements. It's just like, you know, here's me trying and learning and, you know, making my own attempts at using these ideas, right? So this is another painting I did. And here I'm trying, I think that the things that work really well about it is that there's like so compositionally, there's like a large, quite simple, uneven division of space. So there's like a triangle, but it's not exactly a triangle, like it's not exactly centered. And I think that's just kind of interesting about it. It's like a little bit of a shift, you know. I like the overlap of the fish and the little bubbles. So all these fish over here and little bubbles that they have, I think that they contribute nicely to a feeling of space and depth. And because like one thing is in front of another thing, you know. I think that there's a nice energetic flowy tentacle kind of a rhythm going on with the her body, but as well the fish swimming towards her. So the fish swimming towards her kind of going inwards and towards the background are reinforcing this kind of like just being drawn into her shape, you know, drawn towards her face. So everything's kind of going in this direction. And an important inspiration that I feel like I interpreted decently well. I'm not gonna toot my own horn too much, but I think I did a good job interpreting the underwater photography kind of feeling. To me, it's like it's that noise and kind of you feel a bit of volume, but you feel also kind of a flatness. That something about the way underwater photography looks, I really like it. I find it's a very beautiful look, and I'd like to do more like underwater stuff because it just has this kind of feeling to it that not much else has, I feel like. But yeah, something I don't like at all, it really annoys me now when I look at it, is that I feel like the background could be much better designed. Like not only what it is, you know, but it's just got this like ugly kind of shape distribution and size, and the consideration of big, medium, small, and just the shape design, like not only the way the shapes are sized, but or the brush strokes are placed or whatever, but it's not very it's not sophisticated. It's just very like, okay, I did it. I put in a rock face and some kind of suggestion of some kind of a plant. Like, I don't find it. It's like an intermediate level kind of thing, you know, where it works, but it could be it could be like designed in a much more beautiful, sophisticated way where it like contributes to the image. Because I think there's like in most images, things like if an image is okay, it's like somewhat appealing but not maximally appealing. It's usually because like there's things inside the image are just kind of there. They're kind of okay, you know. Their considerations of shape and rhythm and stuff are, you know, kind of like they're not bad, but they're not great. And so that's the thing that bothers me about the background and other things too, I guess, like a few other things. But, you know, I mean, that's how learning goes, and that's how just learning to be a better artist goes. So this image is one I think I liked. There's things I don't really like about it either, but I think it's okay. I think that's something that contributes to it working well is like these organic rhythms it has, kind of like things, again, like things like sprouting out, kind of like plant. And also the fact that that's like across a nice kind of dome kind of feeling. And then also the rhythms that are kind of going this way across in those root shapes and everything like that. There's kind of like a nice flow or like sets of flows that happen in it. And this kind of plant I really like because I feel like it has a nice dimensionality. You know, kind of you feel the leaves splaying out a little bit. At least I feel like you do. And there's a nice main kind of envelope that goes around the silhouette of this piece that kind of wraps it in a nice way. Like it's not perfect, right? Like this kind of thing pops out, this kind of comes out. But the fact that this is like mostly what it feels like to look at, I think helps. And I think that this is kind of something that makes images work in an appealing way. Like it's not, it doesn't necessarily have to have a main kind of simple overall envelope, but that's something that I like to do and like to notice in images. So this image I think worked really well. I liked it a lot. A lot of other people liked it. I think it has a lot of things that are working really well, but now that the more I look at it now, some things I don't really like that much. So overall, I think it has like a nice flow of a lot of like directional kind of rhythms going in like a nicely set up kind of way. The textures and surfaces are interesting. Like they're not super realistic or super simple. They're more on the simple side, you know, very stylized. But there's just like a nice variety, but there's not too many type of textures either. There's just a couple kind of, and they're kind of organized in a nice way. It's not, it's like it's a little noisy, but it's not too noisy, you know. It's got like simplified shapes and complementary color accents, like, you know, just like red and green over here, purple and like orange yellow. Just this kind of things. Like it's got these nice little combinations of relationships and things. But I find it a little bit noisy, a little bit too flat, not super well composed. But I do like it overall. It's just, you know, these are good things. You know, you have to be critical and use your judgment when you look at what you've done and think of what you're gonna do next and that kind of thing. So here's the list again, just so that you can have a look at it. And in general, I think that the idea with this presentation is that we can make something simple. Sorry, making something complex out of simple building blocks, and that's the idea, right? With art in general, like you it's very complicated. Like being an artist is kind of like trying to be god in a way, and it's impossible. It's an impossible task. It's like super tall order, you know, like, hey, take all the information that makes this miraculous beautiful world what it is, and somehow understand and summarize and remix it into beautiful things. And that's really hard. So but if you simplify that into building blocks you can use and you can grasp individually better and better, then you can make something complex and beautiful and that looks like it's like very masterful, you know, but it's just a lot of simple things that are all um, like in their arrangement going on like very well I'm not sure how to use it, but like they're just like a lot of simple things that are very well arranged, and it's like a symphony, So it's, yeah, it's just like that's what it is, I think. So the previously discussed ideas might seem like basics to acquire and then move past, but I think they're embedded in everything we see and make. So make use of them consciously and subconsciously. So that kind of ties back into something I mentioned earlier. It's like when we were talking about big, medium, small, I made like a little parentheses about how, like, I thought I had it. I was like, oh yeah, big, medium, small. I know that, I get it. But even today, like, there's sometimes I make images, and then like my art director or myself is like, oh hey, you can use a bit more big, medium, small. Like push it more. Have some things more big and some things more small, and just consider that a little bit more. So you never stop learning and interacting with these ideas. So yeah. And I wanted to refer to this Psychra video that I don't know if he has it. Like, I think he changed the video to another, I think he like re-uploaded it or something like that. But he used to have this video that was about eye and hand, like your vision versus your skill, and with this little graph in it, and talking about the progression of our art skill over time, and how the nature of our frustration. He might still have this up, by the way. So I think if you want to like check out this video, it's really good information and it's super insightful. Basically, it's about how the nature of frustration as we progress through art is always because there's like a difference between our ability to see and our ability to do, right? So when you get better at seeing, but you're still lagging a little bit behind at doing, that's because that will generate frustration, because you will look at the thing you are able to do and say, damn it, like I know better than this, so how come through the sheer knowing better I cannot make something better yet? It's very frustrating. It's a frustrating experience, and that's something that, like, if you want to continue in art, you kind of have to understand that that's a given, and it will be frustrating. So prepare yourself mentally and like emotionally, to be able to withstand the discomfort, because the more likely, the more able you are to withstand this discomfort without too much suffering, the more likely you're able to proceed right through this frustrating reality and gain more progress. So just like your hand and your hand and your eye are kind of changing at different levels in time. They're improving. Sometimes they will recede in quality, and yeah. But what I wanted to add is that on top of it, you also have a decision like progress, mileage, or sophistication curve, because the quality the quality over time of your eye and your hand is also interacting with the quality of your choices. And basically, choices, with the word choices, I refer to, well, all types of choices, but also the choices in terms of things that make your artwork more or less appealing. So, like, let's refer to the elements on this list. So, the choices you make in terms of depth or rhythm or size or palette or story, all of those things are also going to recede or improve or stagnate. And over time, hopefully, you're going to be improving those, right? The more you interact with those types of choices, like whether you're just thinking about it subconsciously or consciously, or you're drawing it, or you're practicing it in some way, or you're studying it from another artist, like how are they using color, how are they using size, etc. So these things, like the choices you make in all these different design aspects and such, are gonna also become, part of this art journey of yours, with quality and time and, experience and curiosity and all these things. So yeah, as time and effort go on, previously unavailable levels are unlocked, so make the flow work for you. And I find that really satisfying, because like if you can start today in just understanding the overarching choices that you can begin to improve at, it can like exponentially grow, and later in time you're going to look back and you're going to say like, oh man, like my images have so much more rhythm and interesting palette decisions and depth and such. So all these decisions improve, and you become inspired by the sheer potential. So yeah, this is why I think it's so important to point out these things. And I just want to end on this quote that I love by Nathan Fox, which is, "We've got to get good at this, my friends." And I love when Nathan says that. I forgot what he says it in. I don't know if it's his color and light course or something else, but Nathan just has, good vibes, and he's very inspirational. And yeah, just like it's very satisfying, to improve at these things. And, we're all in it together. So just want to encourage you to stay inspired, stay curious, be like a detective in with all these design principles and ideas. And best of luck to you, and enjoy the rest of Lightbox. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and that it helped. Let me know any thoughts you have. Sorry it's so dark right now. I didn't realize it would get so dark, but this video is so long, I think. But I find all these things so interesting, and so let me know, like, if you have some favorite points that I brought out, if you're focusing on some of these points, or if you're struggling with some of them. I think we all are focusing on a lot of them and struggling with a lot of them, probably. So yeah, okay, I guess that's the end of the time we get to spend together on this day. And so thank you so much. Really appreciate you tuning in and spending some time with me. Yeah, like I said, let me know your thoughts. Bye, have a good one. See ya. Hopefully we get to meet at Lightbox next time. Woo! I can't wait to get to Lightbox again and see everybody. All right, bye. Thank you.